Hi, welcome back to Unit 1, The Giver, Day 2. Today we are going to jump into our short story, which is an example of a dystopian society, and the title is called Harrison Bergeron. You had to start it last night for homework, and we will be continuing today, depending on your comprehension check grade. First, I want you to think about these questions. How does society separate? Is it a good thing to be different? And how does society feel about individuality? Think about those questions for a minute. You have a quick 6-question comprehension check about last night's reading of Harrison Bergeron. I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to do this comprehension check. And depending on your score, you will either go to part 1, which is a reread of the first part of Harrison Bergeron, or part 2, which is the continuation of the story. Let's continue. If your comprehension check score is at least a 50%, 3 out of 6 questions correct, you can go on to part 2 of Harrison Bergeron in the link on your ELA page. If your comprehension check was below a 50%, then I want you to go to part 1 of Harrison Bergeron, which is a reread of the beginning of the story, and it includes teacher modeling and thinking. Let's start. You can click on this link below in order to go to the story, or you can use your hard copy as I read. Harrison Bergeron. The year was 2081 and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law, they were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211, 212, 213 amendments to the Constitution and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General. Wait a minute. 2081. That definitely tells me that this story isn't taking place in the present. That's way in the future. And if everybody is equal, I know this has to be in the future because everybody's not equal now. Some things about living still weren't quite right, though. April, for instance, still drove people crazy by not being springtime. And it was in that clammy month that the HG men took George and Hazel Bergeron's 14-year-old son, Harrison, away. So I've met the characters. George and Hazel are the parents. Harrison is their 14-year-old son who has been taken away. I wonder why he's been taken away. It was tragic, all right, but George and Hazel couldn't think about it very hard. Hazel had a perfectly average intelligence, which meant she couldn't think about anything except in short bursts. And George, while his intelligence was way above normal, had a little mental handicap radio in his ear. He was required by law to wear it at all times. It was tuned to a government transmitter. Every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would send out some sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains. George and Hazel were watching television. There were tears on Hazel's cheeks, but she'd forgotten for the moment what they were about. On the television screen were ballerinas. A buzzer sounded in George's head. His thoughts fled in panic, like bandits from a burglar alarm. That was a real pretty dance. That dance they just did, said Hazel. Huh? Said George. That dance, it was nice, said Hazel. Yep, said George. He tried to think a little about the ballerinas. They weren't really very good. No better than anybody else would have been, anyway. They were burdened with sash weights and bags of birdshot, and their faces were masked, so that no one seeing a free and graceful gesture or a pretty face would feel like something the cat drug in. George was toying with the vague notion that maybe dancers shouldn't be handicapped, but he didn't get very far with it before another noise in his ear radio scattered his thoughts. George winced. So did 2 of the 8 ballerinas. Hazel saw him wince. Having no mental handicap herself, she had to ask George what the latest sound had been. Sounded like somebody hitting a milk bottle with a ball peen hammer, said George. I think it would be real interesting hearing all the different sounds, said Hazel, a little envious. All the things they think up. So I guess George has this transmitter thing in his ear because it prevents him from thinking. And they probably don't want him to think because they did say he has above average intelligence. And they really want everybody to be equal. Okay, I get it now. Earn, said George. Only if I was a handicapper general. You know what I would do, said Hazel. Hazel, as a matter of fact, bore a strong resemblance to the handicapper general, a woman named Diana Moon Glampers. If I was Diana Moon Glampers, said Hazel, I'd have chimes on Sunday. Just chimes, kind of in honor of religion. I could think if it was just chimes, said George. Well, maybe. Make 'em real loud, said Hazel. I think I'd make a good handicapper general. Good as anybody else, said George. Who knows? Better than I do what normal is, said Hazel. Right, said George. He began to think glimmeringly about his abnormal son, who was now in jail, about Harrison. But a 21 gun salute in his head stopped that. Boy, said Hazel, that was a doozy, wasn't it? It was such a doozy that George was white and trembling, and tears stood on the rims of his red eyes. Two of the eight ballerinas had collapsed to the studio floor, were holding their temples. All of a sudden, you look so tired, said Hazel. Why don't you stretch out on the sofa so as you can rest your handicap bag on the pillows, honey bunch? She was referring to the 47 pounds of birdshot in a canvas bag, which was padlocked around George's neck. Go on and rest the bag for a little while, she said. I don't care if you're not equal to me for a while. Okay, so besides him having the transmitter in his ear, he also has these bags he's holding or that's weighing him down. Wonder how that's keeping him equal. George weighed the bag with his hands. I don't mind it, he said. I don't notice it anymore. It's just a part of me. You've been so tired lately, kinds of wore out, said Hazel. If there was just some way we could make a little hole in the bottom of the bag and just take out a few of them lead balls, just a few. 2 years in prison and $2,000 fine for every ball I took out, said George. I don't call that a bargain. If you could just take a few out when you came home from work, said Hazel. I mean, you don't compete with anybody around here. You just sit around. If I tried to get away with it, said George, then other people get away with it. And pretty soon we'll be right back to the dark ages again, with everybody competing against everybody else. You wouldn't like that, would you? Oh, so now I get it. This is why they have the transmitter and the weights and the bags, and because they're trying to keep everybody from competing. I'd hate it, said Hazel. There you are, said George. The minute people start cheating on laws, what do you think happens to society? If Hazel hadn't been able to come up with an answer to this question, George couldn't have supplied one. A siren was going off in his head. Reckon it'll fall apart, all apart, said Hazel. What would, said George blankly. Society, said Hazel uncertainly. Wasn't that what you just said? Who knows, said George. The television program was suddenly interrupted for a news bulletin. It wasn't clear at first as to what the bulletin was about, since the announcer, like all announcers, had a serious speech impediment. For about half a minute, in a state of high excitement, the announcer tried to say, ladies and gentlemen. He finally gave up, handed the bulletin to a ballerina to read. That's all right, Hazel said of the announcer. He tried. That's the big thing. He tried to do the best he could with what God gave him. He should get a nice raise for trying so hard. Ladies and gentlemen, said the ballerina, reading the bulletin, she must have been extraordinarily beautiful because the mask she wore was hideous. And it was easy to see that she was the strongest and most graceful of all the dancers, for her handicap bags were as big as those worn by 200-pound men. I'm going to have to stop there because I am reaching the limits of reading. Read the rest of this page up until the stopping point where you had to stop last night, and we will continue with part two once you're ready.